Act 1, Moment, a definition. On November 14th, 1998, the members of the Tectonic Theater Project traveled to Laramie, Wyoming, and conducted interviews with people of the town. During the next year, we would return to Laramie several times and conduct over 200 interviews. The play you are about to see is edited from those interviews, as well as from journal entries by members of the company and other found texts. Company member Greg Pierotti.
My first interview was with Detective Sergeant Hing of the Laramie Police Department. At the start of the interview, he was sitting behind his desk, sitting something like this.
He transforms into Sergeant Hing.
Born and raised here. My family is a third generation. My parents moved here in the early 1900s. We've had basically my daughter makes it fourth generation. Quite a while. It's a good place to live. Good people, lots of space. Now all the towns in southern Wyoming are laid out and spaced because of the railroad came through. It was how far they could go before having to refuel and rewater. And Laramie was a major stopping point. That's why the towns are spaced so far apart. We're one of the largest states in the country and the least populated.
There's so much space between people and towns here, so much time for reflection.
Rebecca Hilliker, head of the theater department at the University of Wyoming.
You have an opportunity to be happy in your life here. I found that people here were nicer than in the Midwest, where I used to teach, because they were happy. They were glad the sun was shining, and it shines a lot here.
What you have your old-time traditional type ranchers. They've been here forever. Laramie's been the hub of where they come for their supplies and stuff like that.
Stewardship is one thing all our ancestors taught us.
Eileen Engen, rancher.
If you don't take care of the land, then you ruin it, and you lose your living. So you first all have to take care of your land and do everything you can to improve it.
I love it here.
Doc O'Connor, limousine driver.
You couldn't put me back in that mess out there back east. Best thing about it is the climate, the cold, the wind. They say the Wyoming wind will drive a man insane. But you know what? It don't bother me. Well, some of the time it bothers me. But most of the time it don't.
And then you got the university population.
I moved here after living in a couple of big cities.
Philip Dubois, president of the University of Wyoming.
I loved it there, but you'd have to be out of your mind to let your kids out after dark. And here, in the summertime, my kids play out at night till 11 o'clock, and I don't think twice about it.
And then you have the people who live in Laramie, basically.
I moved here from rural Texas.
Zachy Salmon, Laramie resident.
Now in Laramie, if you don't know a person, you will definitely know someone they know. So it can only be 1 degree removed at most. And for me, I love it. I mean, I love to go to the grocery store because I get to visit with 4 or 5 or 6 people every time I go. And I don't really mind people knowing my business because what's my business? I mean, my business is basically good.
I like the trains too. They don't bother me. Well, sometimes they bother me, but most of the times they don't. Even though one goes by every 13 minutes out where I live.
Doc actually lives up in Bossler, but everybody in Laramie knows him. He's also not really a doctor.
They used to carry cattle, them trains. Now all they carry is diapers and cars.
I grew up in Cody, Wyoming.
April Silva, university student.
Laramie is better than where I grew up. I'll give it that.
It's a good place to live. Good people, lots of space. Now, when the incident happened with that boy, a lot of press people came here. And one time, some of them followed me out to the crime scene. And, it was a beautiful day. Absolutely gorgeous day. Real clear and crisp, and the sky was that blue that, you'll never be able to paint it just sky blue. It's just gorgeous. And the mountains in the background and a little snow on them. And this one reporter, a lady person that was out there, she said,
Well, who found the boy? Who was out here anyway?
and I said, well, this is a really popular area for people to run, and mountain biking is really big out here. Horseback riding, it's close to town. And she looked at me and she said,
Who in the hell would want to run out here?
and I'm thinking, lady, you're just missing the point. All you got to do is turn around, see the mountains, smell the air, listen to the birds, just take in what's around you. They were just nothing but the story. I didn't feel judged. I felt that they were stupid. They're missing the point. They're just missing the whole point.
It's hard to talk about Laramie now, to tell you what Laramie is for us.
Jedediah Schultz.
If you would have asked me before, I would have told you Laramie is a beautiful town, secluded enough that you can have your own identity. A town with a strong sense of community. Everyone knows everyone. A town with a personality that most larger cities are stripped of. Now, after Matthew, I would say that Laramie is a town defined by an accident, a crime. We've become Waco. We've become Jasper. We're a noun, a definition, a sign.
Moment. Journal entries. Journal entries. Members of the company. Andy Paris.
Moises called, saying he had an idea for his next theater project. But there was a somberness to his voice, so I asked what it was all about, and he told me he wanted to do a piece about what's happening in Wyoming.
Stephen Belber.
Lee told me the company was thinking of going out to Laramie to conduct interviews, and that they wanted me to come. But I'm hesitant. I have no real interest in prying into a town's unraveling.
Amanda Gronich.
I've never done anything like this in my life. How do you get people to talk to you? What do you ask?
Moises Kaufman.
The company has agreed that we should go to Laramie for a week and interview people. I'm a bit afraid about taking 10 people on a trip of this nature. Must make some safety rules. No one works alone. Everyone carries cell phones. I've made some preliminary contacts with Rebecca Hilliker, head of the theater department at the University of Wyoming. She is hosting a party for us our first night in Laramie and has promised to introduce us to some possible interviewees.
Moment. Rebecca Hilliker.
I must tell you that when I first heard that you were thinking of coming here, when you first called me, I wanted to say you just kicked me in the stomach. Why are you doing this to me? But then I thought, that's stupid. You're not doing this to me. And more importantly, I thought about it and decided that we've had so much negative closure on this whole thing. And the students really need to talk. When this happened, they started talking about it. And then the media descended and all dialogue stopped. You know, I really love my students because they are free thinkers. And you may not like what they have to say, and you may not like their opinions because they can be very redneck, but they are honest and they are truthful. So there's an excitement here. There's a dynamic here with my students that I never had when I was back in the Midwest or in North Dakota, because there was so much Puritanism that dictated how people looked at the world that a lot of times they didn't have an opinion. You couldn't get them to express an opinion. And quite honestly, I'd rather have opinions that I don't like and have that dynamic in education. There's a student that I think you should talk to. His name is Jedediah Schultz.
Moment. Angels in America.
I've lived in Wyoming my whole life. The family has been in Wyoming, well, for generations. Now, when it came time to go to college, my parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I wanted to study theater, and I knew that if I was going to go to college, I was going to have to get on a scholarship, and so they have this competition each year, this Wyoming State High School competition, and I know that if I didn't take first place in duets, that I wasn't going to get a scholarship. So I went to the theater department of the university looking for good scenes, and I asked one of the professors, I was like, I need a killer scene. And he was like, here you go, this is it. And it was from Angels in America. So I read it, and I knew that I could win best scene if I did a good enough job. And when the time came, I told my mom and dad so that they would come to the competition. Now, you have to understand, my parents go to everything, every ball game, every hockey game, everything I've ever done. And they brought me into their room and told me that if I did that scene, that they would not come to see me in the competition. Because they believed that it was wrong, that homosexuality is wrong. They felt that strongly about it that they didn't want to come see their son do probably the most important thing he'd ever done to that point in his life. And I didn't know what to do. I had never, ever gone against my parents' wishes, but I decided to do it. And all I can remember about the competition is that when we were done, me and my scene partner, we came up to each other and we shook hands, and there was a standing ovation. Oh man, it was amazing. And we took first place and we won. And that's how come I can afford to be here at the university, because of that scene. It was one of the best moments of my life, and my parents weren't there. And to this day, that was the one thing that my parents didn't see me do. And thinking back on it, I think, why did I do it? Why did I oppose my parents? Because I'm not gay, so why did I do it? And I guess the only honest answer I can give is that, well, I wanted to win. It was such a good scene. It was like the best scene. Do you know Mr. Kushner? Maybe you can tell him.
Moment. Journal entries. Company member Greg Pirati.
We arrived today in the Denver airport and drove to Laramie. The moment we crossed the Wyoming border, I swear I saw a herd of buffalo. Also, I thought it was strange that the Wyoming sign said, Wyoming, like no place on earth, instead of Wyoming, like no place else on earth.
Company member Lee Fondakowski.
I stopped at a local inn for a bite to eat, and my waitress said to me,
Hi, my name is Debbie. I was born in 1954, and Debbie Reynolds was big then. So yes, there are a lot of us around, but I promise I won't slap you if you leave your elbows on the table.
Today, the company tried to explain to me to no avail what chicken fried steak was.
Now, are you from Wyoming, or are you just passing through?
We're just passing through.
Company member Barbara Pitts.
We arrived in Laramie tonight, just past the Welcome to Laramie sign. Population 26,687. The first thing to greet us was a Walmart. In the dark, we could be on any main drag in America. Fast food chains, gas stations. But as we drove into the downtown area by the railroad tracks, the buildings still looked like a turn-of-the-century Western town. Oh, and as we passed the University Inn on the sign where amenities such as heated pool or cable TV are usually touted, it said, hate is not a Laramie value.
Greg Pirati. Moment. Allison and Marge.
I met today with two longtime Laramie residents, Allison Mears and Marge Murray, two social service workers who taught me a thing or two.
Well, what Laramie used to be like when Marge was growing up, well, it was mostly rural.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed it, you know. My kids all had horses.
Well, there was more land. I mean, you could keep your pet cow, your horse, your chickens. You know, just have your little bit of acreage.
Yeah, I could run around the house in my all-togethers, do the housework while the kids were in school, and nobody could see me. And if they got that close...
Well, then that's their problem.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got the expression right. In your all-togethers?
Well, yeah, honey. While we're close.
Now, how's he gonna use that in his play?
So this was a big ranching town.
Oh, not just ranching. This was a big railroad town at one time, before they moved everything to Cheyenne and Green River and Omaha. So now, well, it's just a drive-through spot for the railroad, because even, what was it, in the 50s? Well, they had one big roadhouse, and they had such a big shop, they could build a complete engine.
They did. My mom worked there.
Your mom worked in a roundhouse?
Yep. She watched engines. Her name was Minnie. We used to, sing that song for her. You know that song.
What song?
Run for the roadhouse, Minnie. They can't corner you there.
But I'll tell you, Wyoming is bad in terms of jobs. I mean, the university has the big, high, whoop-de-doo jobs, but Wyoming, unless you're a professional, well, the bulk of the people are working minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, I've been either in the service industry or bartending most of my life. Now I know everybody in town.
And she does.
And I do. Now that I tell ya, here in Laramie, there is a difference, and there always has been. What it is a class distinction. It's about the well-educated and the ones that are not. And the educated don't understand why the ones that are not don't get educated. That's why I told you before my kids had to fight because their mother was a bartender. Never mind. I was the best damn bartender in town.
And she was.
That's not bragging. That's a fact.
But here in Laramie, if it weren't for the university, we'd just be SOL.
What's SOL?
Well, do I have to say it? Well, it's shit out of luck. Oh, Lordy, you've got that on your tape. Boy, you are getting an education today.
Yeah, I guess I am. So let me just ask you, what was your response when this happened to Matthew Shepard?
Well, I've been close enough to the case to know many of the people. I have a daughter that's on the sheriff's department. As far as the gay issue, I don't give a damn one way or the other as long as they don't bother me. And even if they did, I'd just say no thank you. And that's the attitude of most of the Laramie population. They might poke one if they were in a bar situation, you know. They had been drinking, they might actually smack one in the mouth, but then they just walk away. Most of them say they would just say, I don't swing that way, and whistle on about their business. Laramie is live and let live.
I'd say that Marge probably knows a lot more, except she's even willing to say. And we have to respect her for that.
Well, where are you going with this story?
Oh, well, we still haven't decided. When we're finished, we are going to try to bring it around to Laramie.
Okay then. There are parts I won't tell you.
Moment. Matthew. Company member Andy Paris.
Today, for the first time, we met someone who actually knew Matthew Shepard. Trish Steger, owner of a shop in town, referred to him as Matt.
Matt used to come into my shop. That's how I knew him.
It was the first time I heard him referred to as Matt instead of Matthew. Did he go by Matt to everyone?
Well, on the 2nd of October, I get a phone call about 10 after 7.
Doc O'Connor.
It was Matthew Shepard, and he said, can you pick me up at the corner of 3rd and Grand? So anyhow, I pull up to the corner to see who Matthew Shepard, it's a little guy, about 5'2", soaking wet. I bet you 97 pounds tops. They say he weighed 110, but I wouldn't believe it. They also say he was about 5'5" in the newspapers, but this man, he was really only about 5'2", maybe 5'1". So he walks up to the window. I'm going to try and go in steps so you can better understand the principle of this man. So he walks up to the window and I say, are you Matthew Shepard? And he says, yeah, I'm Matthew Shepard, but I don't want you to call me Matthew or Mr. Shepard. I don't want you to call me anything. My name is Matt. And I want you to know I am gay and we're going to a gay bar. Do you have a problem with that? And I said, how are you paying? The fact is, Laramie doesn't have any gay bars. And for that matter, either does Wyoming. So he was hiring me to take him down to Fort Collins, Colorado, about an hour away. Matt was a blunt little shit. You know what I'm saying? He always was, but I liked him because he was straightforward. You see what I'm saying? Maybe gay, but straightforward. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know, how does one person ever tell about another? You really should talk to my sister, Romaine. She was a very close friend of Matthew's.
We never called him Matthew, actually. Most of the time, we called him Choo Choo. Because we used to call him Matthew, and then we just called him Choo Choo. And whenever I think of Matthew, I always think of his incredible beaming smile. I mean, he'd walk in and he'd be like, and he'd smile at everyone. He just made you feel great. And he would, stare people down in the coffee shop because he always wanted to sit on the end of the seat so he could talk to me while I was working. And if someone was sitting in that seat, he would just sit there and stare at them until they left. And then he would claim the spot. But Matthew definitely had a political side to him. I mean, he really wanted to get into political affairs. That's all his big interest was, watching CNN and MSNBC. I mean, that's the only TV station I ever saw his TV tuned into. He was just really smart in political affairs, but not too smart on, common sense things. So he moves to Laramie to go to school.
Matthew was very shy when he first came in.
John Peacock, Matthew Shepard's academic advisor.
To the point of being somewhat mousy, I'd almost say. He was having some difficulties adjusting, but this was quite clear. And so his mousiness, his shyness gave way to him. He was excited about this track that he was going to embark on. He was just figuring out what into work on. He was going to do that. And when that happens, this person begins to bloom a little bit. He was starting to say, wow, there are opportunities here. There are things that I can do in this world. I can be important.
I did hear from Matthew about 48 hours before his attack. Yeah, and he told me that he had joined the gay and lesbian group on campus, and he said he was enjoying it. He was getting ready for Pride Week and whatnot. I mean, he was totally stoked about school. Yeah, he was really happy about being there.
And in retrospect, and I can only say this in retrospect, of course, I think that's where he was heading, towards human rights, which only adds to the irony and tragedy of this.
Moment. Who's getting what?
Let me tell you something else here. There's more gay people in Wyoming than meets the eye. I know for a fact. They're not particularly what you call them the queens, the gay people, the queens, run around faggot type people. No, they're the ones that throw bail, hate, jump on horses, brand them, and kick ass. You see what I'm saying? As I always say, don't fuck with a Wyoming queer, because they will kick you in your fucking ass. But that's not the point of what I'm trying to say. Because I know a lot of gay people in Wyoming. I know a lot of people, period. I've been lived up here some 40-odd years. You see what I'm saying? And I don't think Wyoming people give a damn one way or another if you're gay or straight. That's just what I just said. Doesn't matter. If there's 8 men and 1 woman in a Wyoming bar, which is often the case, now you stop and think, who's getting what? You see what I'm saying? Now, geez, it don't take a big, intelligent mind to figure that one out.
Moment. Easier said than done.
My understanding when I first came here
Catherine Connolly.
is that I was the first out lesbian or gay faculty member on campus. And that was in 1992. So that wasn't that long ago. I was asked at my interview what my husband did. And so I came out then. Do you want a funny story? When you first get here as a new faculty member, there's all these things you have to do. And so I was in my office and I noticed that this woman called. I was expecting, it was a health insurance phone call, something like that. And so I called her back. And I could hear her. She's working on her keyboard, clicking away. I said, this is Kathy Connolly, returning your phone call. And she said, oh, it's you. And I thought, this is bizarre. And she said, I hear you're gay. I hear you are. I was like, uh-huh. And she said, I hear you come as a couple. I'm one too. Not a couple, just a person. And so she was a kind of lesbian who knew I was coming, and she wanted to come over and meet me immediately. And she later told me that there were other lesbians that she knew who wouldn't be seen with me, that it would irreparably taint them, that just to be seen with me could be a problem.
When I came here, I knew it was going to be hard as a gay man.
Jonas Slonaker.
But I kept telling myself, people should live where they want to live. And there would be times I would go down to Denver and I would go to gay bars. And people would ask where I was from. And I'd say, Laramie, Wyoming. And I met so many men down there from Wyoming. So many gay men who grew up here and they're like, this is not a place where I can live. How can you live there? I had to get out. Grr. But every once in a while, there would be a guy, oh gosh, I miss Laramie. I mean, I really love it there. That's where I want to live. And they get this starry-eyed look. And I'm like, if that's where you want to live, do it. I mean, imagine if more gay people stayed in small towns. But it's easier said than done, of course.
Moment. Journal entries.
Today we are moving from our motel and heading to the Best Western.
Moises Kaufman.
My hope is that it is a better Western.
Amanda Gronich.
Today we divided up to go to different churches in the community. Moises and I were given a Baptist church. We were welcomed into the services by the Reverend himself, standing at the entrance to the chapel. This is what I remember of his sermon that morning.
Moment. The word.
My dear brothers and sisters, I am here today to bring you the word of the Lord. Now I have a simple truth that I tell to my colleagues, and I'm going to tell it to you today. The word is either sufficient or it is not. Science tells me that human history, that the world is 5 billion or 6 billion years old. After all, what's billion years, given or take? The Bible tells me that the human history is 6,000 years old. The word is either sufficient or it is not.
The sociology of religion in the West.
Stephen Mead Johnson, Unitarian minister.
Dominant religious traditions in this town. Baptist, Mormon, they're everywhere. It's not just Salt Lake, they're all over. They're like jam on toast down here.
The Mormon church has a little different thing going that irritates some folks.
Doug Laws, stake ecclesiastical leader for the Mormon church.
And that is that we absolutely believe that God still speaks to man. We don't think that it happened and some folks wrote it in the Bible. God speaks to us today, and we believe that. We believe that the prophet of the church has the authority to receive inspiration and revelation from God.
So the spectrum would be on the left side of that panel, so far left that I'm probably sitting by myself, is me and the Unitarian Church. Unitarians are by and large humanists, many of whom are atheists. I mean, we're not even sure we're a religion. And to my right on the spectrum, to his credit, Father Roger, Catholic priest, who is well established here. And God bless him. He did not equivocate at all when this happened. He hosted a vigil for Matthew that night.
I was really jolted because, when we did the vigil, we wanted to get other ministers involved, and we called some of them, and they were not going to get involved. And it was like, we are going to stand back and wait and see which way the wind was blowing. And that angered me immensely. We are supposed to stand out as leaders. I thought, wow, what's going on here?
God has set boundaries, and one of our responsibilities is to learn. What is it that God wants? So you study scripture, you look to your leaders, then you know what the bounds are. Now, once you kind of know what the bounds are, then you sort of get a feeling for what's out of bounds. There was a proclamation that came out on the family. A family is defined as one woman and one man and children. That's a family. That's about as clear as you can state it. There's no sexual deviation in the Mormon church. No leniency. We just think it's out of bounds.
I warn you, you will be mocked. You will be ridiculed for the singularity of your faith. But you let the Bible be your guide. It's there. It's all in there.
The Christian pastors, many of the conservative ones, were silent on this. Conservative Christians use the Bible to show the rest of the world it says here in the Bible. And most Americans believe, and they do, that the Bible is the Word of God. How are you going to fight that?
I am a Bibleist, which means the Bible doesn't need me to be true. The Bible is true whether I believe it or not. The Word is either sufficient or it is not.
I arrived in Laramie on September 15th. I looked around. Tumbleweed, cement factory, and said, what the hell am I doing in Wyoming? Three weeks later, I found out what the hell I'm doing in Wyoming.
Moment, a scarf.
I had breakfast this morning with a university student named Zubaida Ullah. She is an Islamic feminist who likes to do things her own way.
I've lived in Laramie since I was 4. Yeah, my parents are from Bangladesh. 2 years ago, because I'm Muslim, I decided to start wearing a scarf. That's really changed my life in Laramie. Yeah. Like, people say things to me like, why do you have to wear that thing on your head? Like, when I go to the grocery store, I'm not looking to give people Islam 101. You know what I mean? So I'll be like, well, it's part of my religion, and they'll be, this is the worst part, because they'll be like, I know it's part of your religion, but why? And it's, how am I supposed to go into the whole doctrine of physical modesty and my own spiritual relationship with the Lord, standing there with my pop and chips? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so unreal to me that a group from New York would be writing a play about Laramie. And then I was picturing, like, you're going to be in a play about my town. You're going to be on stage in New York, and you're going to be acting like you're us. That's so weird.
Moment, lifestyle 1.
Hello? Yes. Hello. My name is Samantha Groening, and I'm here in Laramie working with a theater company. I went to the Reverend's, your husband's church, on Sunday, and I was extremely interested in talking with the Reverend about some of his thoughts about recent events. Well,
I don't think he'll want to talk to you. He has very biblical views about homosexuality. He doesn't condone that kind of violence. But he doesn't condone that kind of lifestyle. You know what I mean? And he was just bombarded with press after this happened. And the media has been just terrible about this whole thing.
Oh, I know. I really understand. It must have just been terrible.
Oh, yes. I think we are all hoping this just goes away.
Well, do you think maybe I could call back and speak with your husband just briefly?
Well, all right. You can call him back tonight at 9 o'clock.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll do that.
Moment. The fireside.
Today, Barbara and I went to the Fireside Bar, which is the last place Matthew was seen in public.
The fireside. Definitely feels like a college bar, with a couple of pool tables and a stage area for karaoke night. Still, the few regulars in the late afternoon were hardly the college crowd.
First person we talked to was Matt Mickelson, the owner.
My great-grandfather moved here in 1862. He owned Laramie First Opera House, and it was called Old Blue Front. And in 1870, his grandmother Swain cast the first women's ballot in any free election in the world, and that's why Wyoming is the equality state. So what I want to do is reestablish my bar business as Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Times Emporium. You know, I want to have a restaurant. I want to have a gift shop. I want to have a pool hall and do all this shit, you know? Every night's ladies' night. So the fireside is the first step towards the Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Times Emporium.
So what about the night Matthew Shepard was here?
We had karaoke that night. 20 or 30 people here. Matthew Shepard came in sitting right where you're sitting, just hanging out. I mean, if you want to talk to someone, you should talk to Matt Galloway. He was the kid that was bartending that night. You'd have to meet him. He's a character, stands for itself. Hey, is Galloway bartending tonight?
Okay, I'm going to make this brief, quick, get it over with, but it will be everything. Factual, just the facts. All right, here we go. 10 o'clock, I clock in, usual time, Tuesday nights. 10:30, Matthew Shepard shows up, alone, sits down, orders a Heineken.
Phil Labrie, friend of Matthew Shepard.
Matt liked to drink Heineken and nothing else. Heineken, even though you have to pay $95 for a six-pack. He'd always buy the same beer.
So what can I tell you about Matt? If you had 100 customers like him, it'd be the most perfect bar I've ever been in, okay? And nothing to do with sexual orientation. Absolute mannerisms, manners, politeness, intelligence. Taking care of me, as in tips. Everything. Conversation, dress nice, clean cut. Some people you just, sits down, please, thank you, offers intellect, within their vocabulary. So he kicks it there. Didn't seem to have any worries or like he was looking for anyone, just enjoying his drink and the company around. Now, approximately 11:45, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson come in. I didn't know their names then, but they're the accused. They're the perps. They're the accused. They walked in just very stone-faced, dirty, grungy, rude, gimme, that type of thing. They walked up to the bar, and as you know, paid for a pitcher with dimes and quarters, which is something that, you don't forget. You don't forget that. $5.50 in dimes and quarters, it's a freaking nightmare. Now, Henderson and McKinney, they didn't seem intoxicated at all. They came in, they just ordered a beer, took the pitcher with them back there into the pool room, and kept to themselves. Next thing I knew, probably a half hour later, they were kind of walking around, no beer. And I remember thinking to myself that I'm not going to ask them if they want another one, because obviously they just paid for a pitcher with dimes and quarters. I have a real good feeling they don't have any more money.
Romaine Patterson.
money meant nothing to Matthew because he came from a lot of it. And he would like hand over his wallet in 2 seconds because money meant nothing. His shoes might have meant something. They can say it was robbery. I don't buy it for even an iota of a second.
Then, a few moments later, I looked over and Aaron and Russell had been talking to Matthew Shepard.
Aaron said that a guy walked up to him and said that he was gay and wanted to get with Aaron and Russ.
Kristen Price, girlfriend of Aaron McKinney.
And that he got aggravated with it and told him that he was straight and didn't want anything to do with him and walked away. He said that is when he and Russell went to the bathroom and decided to pretend they were gay and get him in the truck and rob him.
Okay, no. They stated that Matt approached them, that he came on to them. I absolutely, positively disbelieve and refute that statement. 100%. Refute it. I'm going to give you 2 reasons why. 1, character reference. Why would he approach them? Why them? He wasn't approaching anybody else in the bar. They say he's gay. He was a flaming gay. He's going to come on to people like that? Bullshit. He never came on to me. Hello? He came on to them? I don't believe it. 2, territorialism is the word I will use for this. And that's the fact that Matt was sitting there. Russell and Aaron were in the pool area. Upon their first interaction, they were in Matt's area, in the area that Matt had been seen all night. So who approached who by that?
But Matthew was the kind of person, like, he would never not talk to someone for any reason. If someone started talking to him, he'd just be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. He never had any problem just striking up a conversation with anybody.
Matt did feel lonely a lot of times. Me knowing that, and knowing how gullible Matt could be, he would have walked right into it. The fact that he was at the bar alone without any friends made him that much more vulnerable.
So the only thing is, and this is what I'm testifying to, because, I'm also basically the key witness in this case. Basically, what I'm testifying is that I saw Matthew leave. I saw 2 individuals leave with Matthew. I didn't see their faces, but I saw the back of their heads. At the same time, McKinney and Henderson were no longer around. You do the math.
Actually, I think the DJ was the last one to talk to him on his way out that night. Gave him a cigarette or something. His name is Shadow.
I was the last person that Matt talked to before he left the fireside. I was just bullshitting around with my shit when he stopped me. I stopped him, actually, and he's like, hey, Shadow, da-da-da. And I was like, what, man, you getting ready to leave? He's like, yeah, man, and this and that. But then I noticed them 2 guys, and they stood outside. You could see it. They were standing there, and he was looking over to them, and they were looking back at him. And I stood and talked to Matt for like a good 10 minutes, and you've seen the guys with him. You've seen him worried, anxious to leave and shit. So when they took off, I seen it. When they took off, it was in a black truck. It was a small truck, and the 3 of them sat in the front seat, and Matt sat in the middle. And I didn't think nothing of it, I didn't figure them guys was gonna be like that.
Moment, McKinney and Henderson. A friend of Aaron McKinney.
Oh, I've known Aaron a long time. Aaron was a good kid. I liked Aaron a lot. That's why I was shocked when I heard this. I'm like, I know he was living out far at his trailer house, is what he told me, with his girl. They just started dating last summer. They must have gotten pregnant as soon as they started dating, because they had a kid. He was only 21 years old, but he was running around with a kid. You see, that's the kind of person Aaron was, just like he always dressed in like big clothes, like in like Tommy Hill figure, Polo Gucci. At that time, I knew him. He was just a young kid trying to, he just wanted to fit in, acting tough, acting cool. But, you could get in his face about it, and he would back down like he was some kind of scared kid.
Sherry Annenson.
Russell was just so sweet. He was the one who was the Eagle Scout. I mean, his whole presence was just quiet and sweet. So, of course, it doesn't make sense to me, and I know people snap and whatever, and like, it wasn't a real intimate relationship. I was just his landlord. I did work with him at the chuck wagon, too. And I remember, like, at the Christmas party, he was just totally drunk out of his mind. Like, we were all pretty much just party time. And he wasn't belligerent. He didn't change. His personality didn't change. He was still the same little meek Russell. I remember him coming up to me and saying, "When you get a chance, Sherry, can I have a dance?" Which we never did get around to doing that. But now I just want to shake him, you know? What were you thinking? What in the hell were you thinking?
Moment. The fence.
The fence. I've been out there 4 times. I've taken visitors. That place has become a pilgrimage site. Clearly, that's a very powerful personal experience to go out there. It's so stark and so empty, and you can't help but think of Matthew there for 18 hours in nearly freezing temperature, with that view up there isolated, and the God, my God, why have you forsaken me comes to mind.
Company member Greg Pirati.
Bill Labrie, a friend of Matthew's, took us to the fence this morning. I broke down the minute I touched it. I feel such a strong kinship with this young man. On the way back, I made sure that no one saw me crying.
Lee Fondakowski.
Greg was crying on the way back. I couldn't bring myself to tears, but I felt the same way. I have an interview this afternoon with Aaron Kriegels. He's the boy who found Matthew out there at the fence. I don't think I'm up for it right now. I'll see if someone else can do it.
Moment. Finding Matthew Shepard.
Well, I took off on my bicycle about 5:00 p.m. on Wednesday from my dorm. I just kind of felt like going for a ride. So I went up to the top of Cactus Canyon, and I'm not super familiar with that area. So on my way back down, I didn't know where I was going. I was just sort of picking the way to go, which now it just makes me think that God wanted me to find him, because there's no way that I was going to go that way. So I was in some deep-ass sand, and I wanted to turn around. But for some reason, I kept going. And I went along, and there was this rock on the ground, and I just drilled it. I went over the handlebars, and I ended up on the ground. So I got up, and I was just kind of dusting myself off, and I was looking around, and I noticed something, which ended up being Matt. And he was just lying there by the fence, and I just thought it was a scarecrow. I was like, Halloween's coming up. I thought it was a Halloween gag, so I didn't think much of it. So I got my bike, walked it around to the fence that was there. It was a buck-type fence. And got closer to him, and I noticed his hair. And that was a major key to me, noticing it was a human being, was his hair. Because I just thought it was a dummy. Seriously, I even noticed the chest going up and down. I still kind of thought it was a dummy, you know? I thought it was some kind of mechanism. But when I saw hair, well, I knew it was a human being. So I ran to the nearest house, and I just ran as fast as I could and called the police. I responded to the call.
Officer Reggie Flutie.
When I got there, at first, the only thing I could see was partially somebody's feet. And I got out of my vehicle and raced over. I seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14 years old, because he was so tiny, laying on his back, and he was tied to the bottom end of a pole. I did the best I could. The gentleman was laying on the ground, Matthew Shepard. He was covered in dry blood all over his head. There was dry blood underneath him, and he was barely breathing. He was doing the best he could. I was going to breathe for him, and I couldn't get his mouth open. His mouth just wouldn't open for me. He was covered in, like I said, partially dry blood, and blood all over his head. The only place that he didn't have any blood on him, on his face, was what appeared to be where he'd been crying down his face.
His head was distorted, you know, it didn't look normal. It looked as if he had a real harsh head wound.
I was working the emergency room the night Matthew Shepard was brought in. I don't think that any of us can remember seeing a patient in that condition for a long time. Those of us who've worked in big city hospitals have seen this, but we have some people here who have not worked in big city hospital. And it's not something you expect here. You can expect it. You expect this kind of injuries to come from a car going down a hill at 80 miles an hour. You expect to see gross injuries from something like that, this horrendous, terrible thing. But you don't expect to see that from someone doing this to another person. The ambulance report said it was a beating, so we knew.
There was nothing I could do. I mean, if there was anything that I could have done to help him, I would have done it. But there was nothing. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs at him, trying to get something out of him. Like, hey, wake up. Hello? But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't anything. He was tied to the fence. His hands were thumbs out in what we call a cuffing position, the way we handcuff people. He was bound with real thin white rope. It went around the bottom of the pole about 4 inches up off the ground. His shoes were missing. He was tied extremely tight. So I used my boot knife and I tried to slip it between the rope and his wrist. And I had to be extremely careful not to harm Matthew any further.
Your first thought is, well, certainly you'd like to think it's somebody from out of town that comes through and beats somebody. I mean, things like this happen, you know, shit happens, and it happens in Laramie. But if there's been somebody who has been beaten repeatedly, certainly this is something that offends us. I think that's a good word. It offends us.
He was bound so tight. I finally got the knife through there. I'm sorry. We rolled him over to his left side, and when we did that, he quit breathing. Immediately, I put him back on his back, and that was just enough of an adjustment. It gave me enough room to cut him free there. I seen the EMS unit trying to get to the location. Once the ambulance got there, we put a neck collar on him, placed him on the backboard and scooted him from underneath the fence. And then Rob drove the ambulance to Evanston Hospital's emergency room.
Now, the strange thing is, 20 minutes before Matthew came in, Aaron McKinney was brought in by his girlfriend. Now, I guess he had gotten into a fight later on that night back in town. So I'm working on Aaron, and the ambulance comes in with Matthew. Now, at this point, I don't know there's a connection at all. So I tell Aaron to wait, and I go to treat Matthew. So there's Aaron in one room of the ER and Matthew in another room 2 doors down. Now, as soon as we saw Matthew, it was very obvious that his care was beyond our capabilities. Called the neurosurgeon at Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he was on the road in an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
They showed me a picture days later, a picture of Matthew. I would have never recognized him.
Then 2 days later, I found out the connection, and I was very struck. They were 2 kids. They were both my patients, and they were 2 kids. I took care of both of them, of both their bodies, and for a brief moment, I wondered if this is how God feels when he looks down at us, how we are all his kids, our bodies, our souls, and I felt a great deal of compassion for both of them.
End of Act 1.